This is Ethical and Legal Issues, Chapter 3. Course Learning Objectives for the chapter. Our own individual attitudes, our beliefs, our values, and our morals, they influence who we are as a human being. Our values are often used as a basis for us making our decisions. Once an individual has their values and morals established, they become deeply ingrained within their being, and they are not changed easily. When we talk about individuals and their rights, we think about justice, that everyone should be treated equally and fairly, and it should apply to all of the citizens around the world. Having certain rights also comes with certain obligations. While we know that our patients have their Bill of Rights, which tells us that they are to be respected, cared for, have their privacy, confidentiality maintained, we also understand that individuals that have mental illnesses may lose their rights in one of two fashions. First, if they are not lucid to reality, people may not actually understand or recognize their own rights. Also, the mental health system that we have can impose limits on individuals' abilities to exercise their own rights. Currently, our federal legislation has mental health parity laws. This requires insurance companies to include coverage for mental illnesses that equal coverage for our physical illnesses. As a nurse and a care provider, I have the right to function within a safe environment. This is not only the physical environment, but also the affective or the mental environment. Healthcare ethics focuses on moral aspects of healthcare availability, delivery, as well as policy. They are also known as biomedical ethics, bioethics, or medical ethics. So if you ever hear about an ethics committee, these are individuals that judge whether or not research should be done on a certain population of people. Autonomy is the right of people to act for themselves and to make personal choices. That includes refusing treatment. So as a nurse, we have in medicine what is called an informed consent. An informed consent is to help promote autonomy because patients are provided relevant information and they are allowed to make a choice for the procedure. Beneficence is the act of doing good for another individual. Non-maleficence can be stated as do no harm. We want to make sure that we're concerned about our patients' safety and that patients are not harmed during any treatment. Justice means that everyone should be treated equally, fairly, as well as respectively. Confidentiality means that we as nurses understand it is legal and ethical for us to respect private information, and we will only share with those individuals on the need-to-know basis or those that are actually involved directly with care. Fidelity, that is keeping your word. Veracity, That means to tell the truth. All codes of ethics are based on the same moral principles. We provide information to our patients and our clients that is truthful, and we support our patients. If there's ever any question of whether or not something is appropriate, we will go to our supervisor. Because we as medical individuals have ethical dilemmas or conflicts, institutions have what is called bioethics committees. These committees will study and educate and assist staff members to cope with ethical dilemmas. They will also often help find a solution to an ethical dilemma. When we identify all elements of the situation, we are actually assessing the situation. We're gathering our data, and we want to make sure that we identify every person that is involved within decision making. When we assume goodwill, we want to make sure that everyone, all the care providers, have the same idea of a satisfactory resolution to the problem. When we work together as a team, we realize that there is no competition. When we are gathering relevant information, we want to make sure that we assess the lifestyle, the preferences, and the support systems for our actual client. We try to get an idea of the resolution for a dilemma. Whenever we list and order values, we decide which ethical principles are most valuable and most important within that situation. We list them in order of importance, and then we determine the plan or the course of action. When we take action, we are doing the implementation step of the ADPI, and this is where we monitor our changes. Once we have completed our plan, now we're going to evaluate and see if our plan has been effective. In the United States, federal law defines the organization of our government. It is based on the United States Constitution. At the state level, the laws come from the state's constitution, and local and city laws actually evolve from state laws. In criminal law, there are very serious crimes known as felonies, and these are either punishable by imprisonment or death. And crimes that are less severe are called misdemeanors, and these can range from getting a fine to being in prison less than 1 year. Contract deals with agreements between individuals or institutions. The definition of a tort reads, a tort is a legal wrong that is committed against the person or the property of another individual. Therefore, tort law relates to individuals' rights and the process of being compensated for a wrong. The Nurse Practice Act varies from state to state. Each state identifies the rules within its own boundaries. As nurses, we are legally responsible for our actions, and we are required to know what is in our Nurse Practice Act within the state that we are practicing the profession of nursing. Policies actually define a course of action. It tells what and how a skill or a task will be done. A standard or standards of practice, these are developed by the specific healthcare professionals, A standard is a measurement to compare against one's action. Liability remains with the caregivers in that caregivers are legally responsible for their professional behaviors as well as their obligations. People that have mental illness or disease may not even understand or know their legal rights, and they're not always able to exercise or enforce them. Oftentimes, because of the mental impairment, the judgment of our client may be limited, and it is vital that we as nurses advocate and we help safeguard our clients' legal rights. So for involuntary admission, a physician, the police, or a county administrator representative may have an individual committed for emergency treatment without a warrant, but a court order is routinely required for long-term stay. The commitment process begins when a formal petition is filed. Clients that are held in hospital wards indefinitely, they have to have a very grave disability and they are unable to provide for themselves. Controlled substances include narcotics, stimulants, depressants, hallucinogens, and some tranquilizers. So when we think about negligence and we think about malpractice, with negligence, we are not doing the act that we should or maybe would not do in the situation. And for malpractice, that would be an example of a nurse that does not have the skill set that is necessary to assist the patient, and then the patient becomes injured or harmed. Medical professionals can be sued. We are routinely sued for negligence. So for us to be sued, the plaintiff has to meet 4 requirements: that the provider of the care owed a duty to the client, the provider of the care did not carry out the duty or they breached the duty, the client was injured because of the action or inaction of the care provider, and that actual loss or damage occurred due to the action or inaction. For any treatment, the patient must consent to treatment. To obtain a consent, it is actually the physician's responsibility, but nurses often will help the physician. We especially want to make sure that our patient has appropriate understanding. Elopement is another consideration. This will happen when clients will run away from the institution. We as caregivers, nurses, we have a duty to warn, and we need to protect potential victims from possible harm. When thinking about negligence, documentation or lack of documentation in client records will be used in the court of law because it is a legal documentation. And remember that when we are being looked at as a professional, the law judges nurses' actions by asking, what would a reasonable and prudent nurse do underneath similar circumstances during a similar situation?